My name's Guy Kesteven, and I've done the professional bike testing thing for over 20 years. And hopefully you've already watched my Trek Top Fuel 9.8 live race review from Bristol Bikefest. But after 120k and a bit of a double-ended Chernobyl meltdown in a Portaloo halfway through, I wasn't really in a fit state to go through the tech details. So what I've done is I've come down somewhere nice and pretty to cover off the numbers and the other spec stuff you need to know down by the river. And also I've had another couple of weeks riding trail on this bike, which has, you know, changed my mind on some things and sort of clarified my view on others. So first up, Top Fuel. Bike's been in the Trek range for a long time, but because of the way they're changing their lineup, they've got this new race bike that I think it's due out late this year. It's already been raced on the World Cup by Yolanda Neff and others. It looks like a kind of semi-hardtail, but with a shock hidden in a sock on the top tube. Nobody knows what's under there at the moment, but there's no linkage or anything going on, so it looks like some kind of elaborate softtail. Maybe something, I mean, probably something more advanced than the old Trek STP or the Fisher Goldenfly, as it was called, that Petso won the Olympic gold on. But anyway, something very, very light and something quite short travel, which means that the Top Fuel can now go up a bracket, really. I mean, it's still, if you look on the Trek website, it's still under the XC category, but they describe it as a light trail bike as well. And it's definitely moving more towards that. I mean, ignore the bars for the moment and the lockout, but certainly, let's point this way. Certainly from this way, it's looking much more like a trail bike. In terms of frame weight, that means it goes up 370 grams for a medium frame, which, you know, is going to make the weight weenies a bit jittery, but you're getting so much more for that extra 370 grams. You're getting much longer reach. Sorry, that's compared to the previous Top Fuel SL frame. You're getting much longer reach, 470mm in the low setting, 475 in the high setting, just the way the bike tilt works out. You're getting a 120mm Fox 34 SC fork up front. You are getting a 67.5 or 68.5 degree head angle and a 75 or 75.5 degree seat angle, depending on where you move that little Mino Link flip chip there. It just raises or lowers the ride height for the bottom bracket from 337 to 442. Another number beginning with 4 that might be interesting is 435 for the chainstays. So not super short, but I mean, quite long, to be honest, but actually gives it a really, really good sense of traction, stability. I mean, I'll get this out there. I mean, it's not the most like hoppy, peppy bike around. It's not a real carve and kind of ragged on the edge kind of machine. It's really smooth. It's really, really controlled. But that definitely doesn't mean it's not fun. But it's you know, it's a bike that majors on traction. It majors on a really confident kind of, not mental, not rabid feel, just really, really easily rapid. And there's a ton of other stuff going on that helps with that. 115mm travel at the rear, like I say, it's relatively short 45mm stroke, but it's actually quite, I mean, they've moved the pivot point now. It used to pivot point slightly further forward, and also the shock used to sit on an extension of the chainstays. Now it's quite conventional, it just bottoms out into the frame there. But it's actually quite a subtle, flowing ride. It's certainly not a very stiff, you know, pedal influence, lots of kickback kind of bitey kind of feel through the pedals. It's a real flower. It feels, you know, it feels like a 4-bar bike. I mean, I guess it is a 4-bar in some sense. It's got that ABP pivot across the rear there, the advanced braking pivot, as Trek call it, which puts the rear pivot right through the centre of the rear axle to minimise disturbance from that rear SLX brake if you're giving it plenty. While we're on the subject of ABP, we'll also cover off some of the other Trek specialities. You've got this control freak cable routing, so these little really neat, there's actually multi-part cable clips inside that you can't quite see, and there's a zip tie there which hold the cable steady inside the frame, and that means, you know, very quiet and secure cable routing. There's nothing slapping or rattling around. Again, it's just a nice, quiet, really smooth and efficient feeling ride. The other thing you've got, which they've brought over from their trail bikes, is this knock block headset and little chip on the head tube there. That actually stops the fork coming all the way around to full lock, because it's got this tall lockout set up on here, and also because this straight shot down tube, this really big absolutely straight. I mean, most bikes you'll see now kind of curve back a little bit, but this just runs straight down, and it makes the bike really, really stiff, really, really accurate. I mean, that's the big takeaway on ride feel for this bike. I mean, it's got a very, you know, looks like a session is something of a cliche, but it has got that real Trek family feel, and it's got that Trek family stiffness as well. It's an absolutely rock solid bike. In terms of materials, all top fuels have the same carbon frame, and it's full carbon as well. It's a carbon linkage and carbon seat stay and carbon chainstay, these massive deep chainstays, which previously the cheaper fuels and top fuels used to get an alloy seat stay or an alloy chainstay depending on which level you went. But whether you get the 9.7, 9.8 or the 9.9, they all get this same carbon frame. And like I say, it's slightly heavier than last year's top fuel SL. So that was 2.06 kilos for a medium. This is 2.46 kilos for a medium. But still, you know, if you actually pick some, you know, that's with shock. And I think if you actually, well, I know for a fact that if you picked some of the frames up that are claiming to be lighter than that, you'd get an unpleasant surprise. Other trail aspects of this bike. The other thing that's obviously of interest to people putting in a lot of mileage, it is a press fit bottom bracket. I mean, it means it make it stiff, the frame stiffer and lighter. That's why people use them. But, you know, some people will shy away from a press fit bottom bracket just for the kind of reliability aspect. They're getting better and better all the time, but they don't last as long as threaded bottom brackets typically. And also, you've only got one set of bottle cage bosses. I mean, you get a full-size bottle in there and all frame sizes, but you're not getting two. So if you are going marathon, you're going to need a Camelback or a seat pack or something like that. And one thing you'll have noticed while we're going around, I mean, that I haven't mentioned yet, remote lockout, front and rear. Fox 34 SC performance fork, Fox Evol float performance rear shock. And yet, up on the bar, you've got this RockShox twist lock grip, and you know, they might have mixed brands here, but it actually works really, really well. Really intuitive, really easy to use. The fact you've got that release lever under your thumb is a real godsend when you get a bit dizzy on a race and forget to release it before a descent. And it also means it doesn't interfere with this dropper post. Speaking of which, the dropper post on this top fuel is an absolute monster. That's a full 170mm stroke on a Bontrager own brand Cove seat post. And that, I mean, that's full on enduro drop. That's massive. A lot of race bikes will limit the drop to like 120mm because of the frame or just because of weight. But actually, at 630 grams, this is not a bad weight at all for a dropper post. And the seat post, you know, the seat tube, even though it's got this big kink in it, you can get the seat post fully inserted, so there isn't really an issue. Hello Tilly, thanks for joining in. There really isn't an issue with fitting this length of seat post, although it looks weird on the stat sheet. And having spent a lot of time sat on this, suffering through my legs, I did not suffer through my arse, thanks to this Bontrager Montrose Elite saddle. Really, really, really comfortable. I would have definitely expected some kind of saddle issues on a ride that long, especially in really, really hot conditions, but no trouble at all. And another thing that really makes this bike very smooth, and also but slightly confusing if you're trying to pigeonhole it as whether it's an XC race bike or whether it's a lightweight trail bike, the brand new XR3 team issue tyres. Now, this is a kind of a compilation of loads of, I mean, Bontrager tyres are having a great period at the moment. New guy designing for him, Graham Wilhelm, I speak to a lot, really good, up front, you know, totally honest guy. And it's interesting talking to him about this because basically it's a hybrid of loads of different Bontrager tyres. So you've got Cooper Cabra Tread, which is their big plus tyre, mixed with XR3 and XR4 side knobs, but the actual rubber compound comes off their XR1, XR2 race tyres, so it's a dual compound, but it's quite a hard compound. And then they put it on this 2.4-inch carcass, their trail carcass, with the it's got 60 TPI reinforcing sidewalling. It's got 60 TPI. It's got 60 TPI reinforcing strips in the sidewall there. This inner strength technology they call it. So it's a really stable tyre, even down to super low pressures. I was actually sub-teens. I was down to about 12 psi racing at Bristol, just to kind of really, really soften the ride up. and it was still railing corners absolutely fine. In fact, I think I might have even been under. I was you know, I was just letting the tyre down when I was knackered and just popping the valve. Didn't have a gauge on it or anything. I was actually sub 10 psi on the front at Bristol by the end of it, and it still hung on, still really stable through that corner. So that's a hell of a sign of stability. And I mean, there is a penalty in terms of weight if it's 780 grams, which is pretty chunky for a tyre on a race bike. You know, that's over 1.5 kilos of rubber either end of the bikes. And also these Cove Elite, Bontrager Cove Elite wheels, which it sat on. Carbon rim, so I guess the weight saving's in the right place, but as an overall wheel pack, that's 1,880 grams of wheel. Straight gauge spokes add a bit, the hubs are pretty chunky, but I've had a set of these on long term and they've actually lasted really, really well. There were a few stories going around about them being cracked really, really easily, but I've hammered a set of these for over a year, and 30mm wide internal, so really, really good solid base for the tyre. And you know, they're not top end by any stretch. They're really affordable carbon wheels, and you know, you could definitely release a lot of speed out this bike in terms of acceleration and pep by going to a lighter wheel set and a lighter tyre set. But in terms of that sort of all-trail versatility and just letting this bike, you know, really explore the limits of what it can do with this stiff frame and this really good, I mean, the suspension is really, really capable, even though it's a short stroke shock. The fact that the bike's long and it's really well damped, it carries speed really, really well, even on rough trails. I mean, I've thrown this down some proper DH trails trying to chase people on big bikes. I've had to really, really push it through like moguls and ditches and stuff to properly get it out of its depth. And even then, it was probably more of a rebound issue because I hadn't set it up properly. You know, I'm really looking forward to kind of hanging on to this for a bit and actually exploring the trail side of it. Because, you know, as far as you go up to about there, it's a really, really, really capable trail bike. And even though, I mean, obviously having these remote dials on there means that the compression damping adjustment on the suspension is pretty limited. It's pretty, you know, it's dialed. I had to add, since I've been riding it more aggressively, I've added a volume spacer in the front fork, so it's actually got 3 in there now, just to give it a more progressive ride. I've dropped 5 psi out of Trek's recommended pressures. And interestingly, if you have watched the race review, or you're a Patreon subscriber who's watched the longhand review, I got into a bit of a state in the race, and I thought the shocks were too hard. I think I was just being beaten up just because it was such a long race, and I dropped pressure out of them. But since then, I've actually gone back to the pressure settings that Trek recommend. I mean, sort of body weight plus about 3 kilos, and it's been absolutely spot on. I mean, yeah, can't complain at all. It's just stopped short of full travel most of the time, but given a really supple, really high traction ride, which is obviously helped by these big 2.4 tyres on there. And the whole bike just flows really, really well, which is why these are kind of the only question mark here. 740mm bars are pretty damn narrow for a trail machine. I mean, obviously great for tighter sections of trail or for nipping past people on the start line. And I guess if you're looking at a top fuel as a race bike, then yeah, this is, you know, they're okay. They're adequate in terms of leverage, but definitely want to go 760. I'll probably even try a 780 to get proper leverage to see how much I can really chuck this bike around on. And also these grips with the metal end caps, that really limits how far you can comfortably move your hand out on the bar, which is, you know, a bit of a drawback. So I'm going to, you know, you might like them, you might be fine with a narrower bar, you might be an old school top fuel guy who's just looking for a bit more travel and a bit more trail. But I think if you're looking to explore that trail side of things, then definitely wider bar, shorter stem. But, you know, it didn't put, having said that, it didn't put a wheel wrong for 8 hours all of Bristol Bikefest, and the only time I really started running out of leverage is when I've been throwing it down big downhills in Chevin and places like that. In terms of equipment, while we're talking about it, before I forget, Shimano SLX brakes, fine. Not particularly powerful, but very reliable, very predictable, good lever feel. But again, you know, you could go more powerful or you could go lighter. They're pretty much middle of the road spec, but at least they're dependable. SRAM GX Eagle, great choice. You know, it's getting to be ubiquitous on trail, you know. I mean, great choice. I mean, Shimano are starting to fight back with SLX and XT, but you can't go far wrong with GX. You've got that 500% gear range, and I don't think I ever got into the big Eagle cog when I was racing, but since I've been trail riding, it is occasionally handy to claw your way up stuff. 32 ring on the front. Again, racers might want to go for a 34. There is room for a 34, but for general everyday duties, 32 is fine. Only thing that's worth noting is that the Descendant crank, this is an alloy one, it should come with a SRAM Stylo 7K carbon crank, which will save, I don't know, 100 grams or so. So although it currently weighs 12.16 without pedals for this complete bike, you're probably just going to be just much closer to that kind of 12 kilo bang on figure with the correct crank on. I mean, even if it turns out that they are coming with alloy cranks, not carbon cranks, if I was going to put weight anywhere in a bike, it would be down in the bottom bracket where it's centralised. So while it is, you know, very different in terms of previous top fuels, it's much stiffer, much more trail orientated, much more capable, and well, basically more fun for ragging around when you haven't got a heart rate monitor and Leica on. This is a really good fun trail bike for people who still really want to kick hard on the climbs and might even use a lockout. I mean, to be honest, I've been surprised just how much I have used the lockout, because the suspension is pretty mobile under pedalling. Certainly out the saddle you can make it start bouncing, so it's great to have that lockout. And it's not full lockout, there's still a little bit of movement in there, so traction is still maintained, and it's just so easy to use. You know, I've used it a lot, but then the same is true of the Scott Spark, with obviously a lot of similarities between this bike and the Scott Spark, and that's been a massively popular and successful bike. So I can see why Trek have kind of gone, well, with courses getting more technical and more rowdy, and with bikes like that proving really popular, why don't we make the top fuel a bit sturdier and a bit more fun? And they've done a great job of doing that without, I mean, yeah, heavy wheels and big tyres do dull the acceleration slightly, but that's an upgrade away if you're going to spend a lot of time with a number on your bars. But otherwise, this is a really good, fun trail bike that's naturally very light, naturally very fast, and because it's got those wheels and tyres on, you can really cut loose on it. I mean, it's a great drifting, carving sort of hooligan, you know, it's just a proper throttle twist, give it everything through the pedals uphill, along the single track, or just hang on the descents. It is a whole lot of fun. And like I say, I'm going to try and hang on to it for as long as I can and just see how far I can kind of take it in terms of, you know, pretty full-on trail riding, because I think it's really got definite potential. And if you're building up from a frame, the fact it's got a 75-degree seat angle, even if you put a 130mm fork in there, you're going to still have a 74-degree seat angle, so that'd work. Although, you know, the 34SC is a fantastic fork. It's a great partner for this. It's light, it's really well controlled, and considering it's got these little cutaway segments on the dropout, it is very, you know, in terms of steering, it's pretty damn predictable. But there is that potential to make something rowdier and more accurate out of this top fuel. But be interesting, I guess then it'll be interesting to see what Trek do with the Fuel EX, which this is kind of, I mean, I had a Fuel EX for a long time as a long-termer, and this is the bike if I'm honest, this is the bike I always wanted that bike to be. I could never really get that Fuel EX light and really kind of poppy and lively through the pedals. It never really rewarded a lot of effort on the climbs. Great on descents. I mean, took it to the Alps and all sorts. Great as a kind of deceptively heavy-duty trail bike for 130mm travel. But this with 115 and 120mm travel is that real kind of combination racer trail raver that I really bloody love. So, if I've missed anything, then apologies, but obviously there's a comments bar below. You can start asking about this bike, comparisons to other bikes, about the race itself. There's some more extended stuff on Patreon. There's the extended race edit on there. There's an unboxing edit on there. And I'll probably put some more development stuff as I start playing around with the bike more over time. And that starts at only $3 a month, so please consider a Patreon subscription. And if you are already a Patreon subscriber, thanks so much for your support. It really makes a massive difference in terms of keeping the channel going and sustainable. I mean, this video was paid for by Trek. Thanks very much for doing that. You know, I can't spend a lot of time doing these videos unless they are commercially sustainable. But I've been doing this caper for 22 years, and I'm not going to start just, you know, telling you what they want you to hear. this is all absolutely honest, my opinion, formed on the hoof, not scripted. And that's Tilly in the background. Sorry about the interruption. Where was I? Yeah, it's honest. Any questions, just get busy in the comments below. Thanks to Trek for sponsoring the video. Thanks to Gore for the shirt. Thanks to Giro for the Phantom helmet. Gore do the gloves as well. This is the kit I was actually wearing for Bristol Bikefest, just for a bit of continuity. This is actually a 2020 jersey, so I can't tell you much about it yet because it hasn't come out yet. Sweet Protection on the shorts, Gore on the socks again, and these were Giro cartridge shoes, which are really, really good for the race because they've got a really stiff race sole, but a lot of ventilation. They're actually quite soft upper, so even they've got the boa strap on there, which you can get down pretty tight. They don't blow your feet up, crush them or boil them if it gets really, really hot. And if you are, and please, if you haven't watched it yet, do watch that race video, because getting crushed and getting boiled is exactly what that's all about. But it does prove just what a capable and versatile racer come raver this brand new Top Fuel is. So, alright, this has been a long one. Sorry, I've really rambled on. I mean, I'll obviously edit it down a bit in places, but I think it's still going to turn out quite long. So thanks for your patience. Subscribe, get notifications ticked, watch the other videos about this bike, and please consider joining me on Patreon, because that keeps the channel going long term.